Jag ser Pirat-TV där, jag ser inte med där. På den rutan så ser jag Pirat-TV. Betyder det att jag är live?
Du är live.
Perfekt. Hej! Där är kameran. Hello! Hej, mitt namn är Mattias Bjärnemalm. Jag driver Pirat-TV tillsammans med Katarina Stensson som sitter bakom kameran, så ni ser inte henne. För idag har jag en speciell gäst, en mycket god vän som jag tror att alla som tittar på det här känner igen. Och för att göra det lite lättare för henne så kommer jag byta till engelska. Och det är för att göra det lite lättare för er så att ni slipper tyskan som hade varit det andra alternativet. Så vi går över. So I have a great pleasure to welcome Julia Reda to Pirat-TV. This our...
Sorry, I don't speak Swedish.
Well, it's a learning process, this entire thing. So by the end of the episode, you'll be fluent.
Right.
For those who, against all odds, don't know who Julia is, maybe you want to have a quick introduction. Either you can do it or I can do it.
I'll do it myself. So I'm Julia Reda. I'm the European Pirate Party representative in the European Parliament since 2014. And for those 5 years, I've mostly worked on the copyright reform, which is now really coming to a head. And yeah, happy to be here.
Well, I don't think you can understand how excited we are to be here. You're the person who knows everything about this. Or one of the persons. So hopefully there will be questions from the audience. Otherwise, I will have tons of questions. If there are questions from the audience, our ghost voice will just call them out at the appropriate time, and then we can respond. But let's go from the start. I thought we would. So, the copyright reform. You're not thrilled about the results, if we start there.
No, absolutely not. Like when I joined the European Parliament in 2014, I was actually quite excited about having a copyright reform because European copyright is quite a shambles as it is. We have different rules on what you're allowed to do online in every single country of the EU. And the result of that is that basically nobody knows what they're allowed to do. And even the politicians who want to restrict copyright even further are constantly infringing copyright on their own social media websites. So really nobody knows how to deal with this system we have today. But unfortunately, despite the promises that the goal of this reform was to make everything easier to understand and make it easier for European businesses to deal with copyright, the end result is actually making it worse, primarily because it makes online platforms directly liable for copyright infringements committed by their users, which means that they have to prevent copyright infringements before they are even happening. So this is the much hated upload filter provision, and also because it restricts the ability to share news online.
Yeah. Going back to the positive side, just so I've said on previous episodes of Pirat-TV that a good result would have been a unified European copyright title, a regulation where there would be one copyright legislation all over Europe with harmonized exceptions and limitations, so that what you were allowed to do in one country would be exactly what you're allowed to do in any other country, which makes sense in a digital environment. And that is what we had hoped for, right?
Right, yeah. I mean, in the beginning also the European Commission was saying that what they were planning was a European copyright regulation that would be directly applicable law in the entire EU. And it was mostly universities, educational establishments, libraries, and end users that were really excited about that idea. And but immediately when this idea was presented, there was quite a lot of pushback from especially collecting societies, the entertainment industry, who really want to have this silo structure and don't want copyright to be weakened in any of the countries. And so
basically they want to be able to sell the same thing in one country and then in another country and make sure that it doesn't travel over those borders in any other way than the way they sell it license by license.
Well, that's one of the reasons. There was actually a proposal by the European Commission to mostly get rid of geo-blocking, like this video is not available in your country, and this was viciously attacked by the film industry, which I don't really understand, because the end result is that now everybody watches Amazon Prime and Netflix originals because they are available in the entire EU. And eventually, I think they are just contributing to their own demise by insisting on this old business model.
Well, I think the film industry has been doing that for quite a while with the way they launch films in different days in different countries, and how they still try to make sure that nothing is available except for the cinema version for quite a while. But let's leave, the crushed hopes of a positive copyright reform and go to the bad copyright reform we got.
Right, yeah. So the European Parliament has very recently narrowly adopted this proposal, thanks, among others, to the Swedish members, some of whom apparently pushed the wrong buttons, and others who changed their position at the last minute, which is really unfortunate because, with a few more people voting for the possibility to allow amendments, we would have had the chance to delete the most problematic parts of the reform. Because not everything in the reform is bad, but the good elements, for example, allowing libraries to do a bit more with copyrighted content, are by far outweighed by the problems associated with the upload filters and the link tax.
Yeah. Let's go with the link tax. I normally describe it as bad, and then censorship filter as hurtful or damaging. But let's go to the link tax.
Yeah.
So how would you describe it in just a few sentences?
So basically, journalistic articles are already protected by copyright, and the copyright is held with the journalists. And that there's nothing really wrong with that, but the publishers, or certain press publishers anyway, say that this is not enough, that actually the publishers themselves need to have a right over those articles, and not just the parts that are actually original, but even pretty short elements such as one sentence. And so this link tax basically creates that. It's a new related right that protects the news article itself and gives the right to prevent the publication of that to the publisher. So that means if you want to use a snippet, for example, you're posting a link into Facebook, and Facebook transforms the link into a snippet where it shows a thumbnail picture, the headline, and maybe 2 sentences from the article, that would require Facebook or yourself to pay money to the publisher. And this is pretty absurd, considering that all publishers actually pay social media experts and search engine optimizers to make those snippets look as attractive as possible. And now they're claiming that this is somehow hurting their business model.
And just to clarify, this is for the article regardless of whether there is copyright on parts or all of that article.
Absolutely. I mean, even if it's a machine-generated article, that wouldn't change the fact that it would be protected. And that's the main difference to the copyright that already exists, because you're already not allowed to post, for example, an entire article as a picture on Twitter, even though a lot of people do it, including a lot of journalists. But that's already a copyright infringement. So what would change is that even those short parts that are not protected by copyright because they're not original, they would also be protected, and you would need permission to share them as part of a link.
Yeah. So if you have a long, a big chunk of what you call the starting text of an article that has been not written by the journalist but an editor who just quickly made the top, if you have that entire part, which is not too uncommon to have as a snippet.
Exactly. And I mean, the idea behind this is pretty simple. It's basically to say Google and Facebook have a lot of money, and the news publishers have lost a lot of money. Therefore, Google and Facebook need to give money to the publishers. And I think the reason why this idea is so pervasive is because it's not completely fabricated, because there is kind of a problem or a shift that has taken place.
But that shift is in advertisement.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's much more difficult today to make money with advertisement if you're not Google or Facebook, because they have all our personal data.
So Google and Facebook has taken the advertisement market from, among others, newspapers, not only newspapers, from everyone,
from
basically.
Everybody. Yeah.
So they get money, and some of that money in the past went to the newspapers, and they want it back.
Pretty much.
And then they go to, the one with the big guns, which is the state, and they say pass legislation so we get some of that money.
Yeah, and I mean, it would be sensible to try to address the actual problem. And the Commission tried to do that. There is a proposal that is basically sleeping in the Council at the moment, which is called the e-privacy regulation, which is a law that would limit the possibility for companies to use personal data for targeted advertisement. The Parliament adopted it a long time ago with a pretty good position, and Council, so the national governments, are blocking it, including, ironically, the press publishers, because they think that, well, if this law is passed, they can't do targeted advertising either, But I just think it's really naive to believe that they would be better at targeted advertising than Google or Facebook. So I think overall they would benefit from this.
Well, I have a friend who studies the trackers that get on, that they use on the webpage for the newspapers, and they use a lot of them. They might not be better, but they're heavily invested in trying to track their audience.
But quite often they're actually using Google's and Facebook's tools for that. So, yeah.
So,
audience question?
Yes.
Yeah.
So on YouTube, Walter Olsson asks, will your work affect Article 13?
Well, I mean, I think our work in the Parliament has already affected Article 13 in the sense that we were able to... Okay, that's the camera taking off.
Yeah.
But
now we need we need a tech guy.
Tilt it back a little bit.
You need to tilt the camera in my direction. Because now you can see, you see, it was a glitch in the matrix and people could see the real world behind. So I forgot to say in the beginning, we are not in Stockholm in our usual dungeon. We are in a temporary location in Malmö.
Which is really cool.
And there is a reason for that. So the way I lured Julia to come to the program is that I set up an elaborate scheme where I turned 40. That was step one. And then I threw a party, and then I invited her to the party. And when she said yes to the party, I was like, so you're coming to Malmö, I heard. Maybe you can participate in a live stream during the day. Because since I knew when she was arriving and when the party was starting, I happened to know that you had a gap in between.
So when did you decide to turn 40 to set this amazing plan?
That was roughly 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I was like, 10 years from now, I'm going to turn 40. That's going to be the thing.
Well, it worked, so here I am.
I did turn 40.
Yeah, so back to the question, Article 13. Yeah, I mean, our primary goal has always been to get rid of Article 13, and we came pretty close to that in the European Parliament, so there was a pretty narrow vote to accept it, and quite a lot of opposition to it from very important experts, I would say, including, for example, the UN Special Rapporteur for Freedom of Expression. Unfortunately, Parliament has narrowly adopted it, and the only place in the process where it can be stopped now is the Council. So there's going to be a final vote in the Council on the 15th of April, which will be done by the agriculture ministers of all people. I've been told this is because it's a horse trade, so therefore the agriculture people will be responsible.
That is actually not the case. Basically, when there is an agreement with Parliament, the Council don't want to discuss the topics, so they make them A lists. And then they have all the decisions that has already been agreed by the administrative levels. And then they say, can we adopt all these? And if no one says no, then they're all adopted in one fell swoop. So the idea is that they won't discuss it at this meeting. It will just be adopted unless some member state says, no, we don't want to adopt it, we won't have a discussion.
That's right. So that's pretty much what we can hope for, also from the Swedish government, that they say this is no way to adopt such a controversial law. This should really be discussed by the ministers in charge. Because
it wouldn't be the agricultural ministers, and then suddenly became copyright experts and was like, okay, let's discuss the finer details of Article 13 now.
I would be surprised, although to be honest, sometimes if I hear the Justice and Culture ministers speak about copyright, I think they have no clue either. But, well, that's neither here nor there. But, I mean, I guess you could try to imagine a hypothetical scenario. What would Article 13 look like if the pirates were not in the European Parliament? And it would be a whole lot worse. So I do think we have managed to put some restrictions in case, which are mostly related to which platforms will have to follow these rules. So an initial proposal from the Parliament rapporteur, who is the guy leading the negotiations, for example, did not even limit the article to commercial platforms.
Hold on, we're no longer in... Okay.
That's good. Yeah, so I think that's definitely, I would say, a big improvement that we managed, that we are talking about profit-making platforms. So non-profit platforms would be clearly out.
And then we also carved out specific platforms.
Yeah, although I'm a bit unhappy with that, because basically there was a really broad definition of all kinds of platforms that supposedly hurt the authors. And then we say, but what about Wikipedia? They have large amounts of copyrighted content, but it's all freely licensed. So what is actually the problem? And then they say, okay, fine, we'll write all the platforms except for online encyclopedias. And then we come and say, what about GitHub? GitHub is full of copyrighted content because software is actually copyrighted, but it's extremely important for our economy. I mean, you wouldn't believe how many companies would have serious trouble if GitHub suddenly didn't work anymore. And then their reaction is to write, okay, except for open source development platforms. I don't think that's a very good way of making legislation, because we can't think of all the platforms that we need that are good for authors and then write a long list of exceptions.
And these exceptions, they're basically targeting specific platforms
that already exist,
in sort of a broad phrasing. It's like online encyclopedias. We know they mean Wikipedia, but it's they can't say Wikipedia because, you know, then they could have just said that have Facebook and Google Pay, and then that would have been the easy way and the other way. But that means that this will then be defined by the member states. So what is an encyclopedia in one country?
Yeah.
I mean, Wikipedia would be fine in every, but there are a bunch of other online encyclopedias, and it's not a clear cut what is an encyclopedia and what is a blog, and I mean, that would at the end be the member states drawing that line.
That's right. And also, I think the exceptions that are in there might not even fit the companies that they were intended for. Like, take GitHub. So it says open source development platforms are excluded, but GitHub is increasingly turning into a social network where people are using it to discuss things that have nothing to do with code, or even organizing protests. And then suddenly a court could say, GitHub is actually not an open source software development platform, and then you have a problem. So I hope that, first of all, Council is not going to approve this proposal, but if they do, it will be really important for pirates in all the member states to be extremely active in the process of putting it into national law, because there are some positive elements about trying to narrow down what platforms we're talking about. So in the recitals, for example, which is the part that describes what the law intends to do, but that is not directly legally binding, it says that it should be about platforms that play an important role on the content market. And then you could say, well, this is probably not the case for your average discussion forum. But that requires member states to actually read those recitals and to take them into account when making national laws.
So, and then that would also, of course, be different in different member states where they draw those lines.
Yeah.
Which I suppose means that then that could be a challenge to the European Court at the end of the day. If the collecting societies don't get paid by some platforms in one country, but they get paid by the similar platform in another country, they will want more money and they will take that to court, and then the court will have to decide where we draw the lines.
Yeah, so I think the only group that will definitely benefit from this is lawyers, because there will be a lot of questions about, well, which member state law even applies, because most of those platforms operate in more than one country. And it's extremely vague in terms of how these platforms are defined, and I think there are going to be a lot of lawsuits about that. Hopefully also about the fundamental rights impact.
So if you as a viewer, contemplating your career choice right now, copyright lawyer, that is where the money is.
Don't start an online platform. That's definitely going to be pretty difficult.
But then again, even the online platforms will need to hire copyright lawyers. So, you know, copyright lawyer, can't have enough of them. We have another question.
Real Baka asks, will we still be able to vlog on YouTube in Europe, or the whole YouTube will be locked in Europe?
I think there are different ways that YouTube could deal with the situation. One is that they might decide that they take much stricter control of who can publish there. So if they are at the risk of being sued for copyright infringement, they may not allow uploads from absolutely everybody, but only people basically where they have the name and the address and they know who to sue if they end up with the damage. It could also be that they just run more restrictive upload filters than they have today. I saw a video this week where there was a guy who was giving guitar instructions, and he got a copyright strike for playing a particular chord because Content ID considered that to be somehow very similar to a song that was registered, which is probably true. I mean, there are probably a lot of songs that use the same chord. So
there's the same 4 chords for everything.
So we don't know exactly how YouTube will react to these obligations, but I think the most likely options would be either to use much more restrictive filters, so not just filters for music, but for other types of material as well, possibly gameplay, which could be problematic for Let's Players and so on, or to be much more restrictive about who can post there, and that would mean for amateur streamers or vloggers that they may not be able to use YouTube for that.
And that could also change over time, because I mean the legislation is pretty clear. So if the game industry decides that they want to use this new law, they just have to sue a few platforms, and then suddenly YouTube and everyone else are likely to be much more restrictive.
Yeah, I mean,
at the end of the day, YouTube will act to stay out of court. That will be what they will probably strive for.
That's right.
I mean, most companies don't want to get sued. So
yeah, I think a lot depends also on how the courts will interpret these obligations, because Article 13 says the platform is liable unless it has done everything it can to block the content that rights holders want to block, and it has done everything it can to get licenses from right holders. So the courts will have to decide, well, what does it mean, everything they can? Does it mean actively trying to search for every right holder on the planet, or does it mean just making deals with all the collecting societies? We don't know that, and I think that's also something where, well, the courts will have some room for maneuver, but I expect that there will be a lot of attempts to sue platforms to try to get money from them.
Especially over pricing, because there's a risk that platforms will say, well, we tried everything we can, but the price is too high. And that is where...
Almost certainly. I mean, if you think about... I mean, we're always talking about YouTube, but let's talk about a completely different platform. Let's say you have a photo sharing platform, of which we have hundreds in Europe. In Germany, for example, we have Photo Forum, which is primarily for people to share their own pictures, or we even have dedicated Creative Commons photo platforms, even professional, like commercial ones. And it could be that a court says, well, the best effort to try to get a license for a photo platform means that they have to license the professional photograph catalogs, like Getty Images and stuff like that. And that's probably what they are hoping for. Like, we received an email lobbying very heavily in favor of the proposal by Getty Images. So that would mean you have a Creative Commons photo sharing platform, and that platform has to now get a license from Getty Images, even though that platform has absolutely zero interest in people uploading copyrighted, all rights reserved Getty Images. But they have to do it anyway. And then the question is, obviously Getty is not going to give them a really cheap license, because they don't want all those pictures to be uploaded there either. So they're going to ask a pretty high price. But the platform is not going to be able to pay it because they don't make a lot of money. So does that then mean they have to shut down?
Did they try whatever they could?
Exactly. Yeah. Like, what does it mean, what you can, trying what you can? Does it mean paying the price that the right holders dictate to you?
Because the interesting thing here is that in the article, there is nothing about rights holders having to try to give licenses. They have no obligation to try to give license or to give...
I mean,
we spoke about that in the meetings. There is no requirements, and when we suggested
it explicitly says rights holders are not required to give a license. So this is also why even a really large platform with big profits like YouTube, even if they tried to license with all the collecting societies and pay them, they would still have to filter, because it's enough if one right holder says, I don't want my content to be on there, please filter it, then they have to do that.
And if we look at the film industry, they've been pretty straightforward with their not being interested in licenses. They want to filters. And if you go to the picture platforms, people upload freeze frames from films. I mean,
of course, yeah. Like your average reaction GIF is a short part from a film.
Yeah. So I mean, there's clear that content will be filtered away, because there will be no way for them to get a license for that.
Exactly.
So do we have any other questions?
Yes. If new parliament is more internet friendly, can they reverse the directive, at least the bad part? If so, how fast?
It's actually pretty difficult because the European Parliament doesn't have a right of initiative, unfortunately. So that means they cannot directly change the law just because there is a majority for it. But what you can do if you see that the majorities have changed and that there might be a majority against these proposals is to call upon the Commission to make a proposal. The European Parliament can do this in the form of a resolution, and also the public can do it in the form of a European Citizens Initiative. So this is kind of like a petition where you have to collect 1 million signatures from different European countries, and then the Commission is formally asked to put forward legislation on this. This is not legally binding, but this is one way that you could kind of send a message to the Commission that this law should be reformed.
They don't have to put forward a legal proposal. They have to consider a legal proposal.
That's right.
So it's very much weaker than.
Yeah. So on the one hand, it's not a guarantee for success. On the other hand, we just have a petition with 5 million signatures. So there are certainly enough interest from internet users to possibly do something like that. But I think, well, you can either try to push the Commission to make a proposal, or you can sue. Like, you can try to get the European Court of Justice to make a decision on this law, whether it's in line with fundamental rights. This was successfully done with the Data Retention Directive, but it took many years, and you basically have to wait until a member state has implemented the directive into their national law, and then you can sue against the national law because, for example, because it violated your freedom of expression.
But I have to say that this is not the right path to go, because the problem is, at that point, when we have filters everywhere on all platforms, and the court says, no, we can't force platforms to have filters, the court will not say platforms can't have filters.
Right.
So they can just keep the filters when the law goes away, and then it basically will have a smear campaign from the copyright industry saying that if they take away the filters, to take away the money to all the poor artists. So even if there's even if the law got shut down by the court, so they say, no, we can't impose this filter obligation, that the court will not say no platforms is allowed to have filters.
Right.
So they will still be there, and they will still most likely stay on most platforms. So if we go down the route of filters, once we have the filters, we won't get rid of them. Or, I mean, we to some extent we might lessen the impact, but the general idea of having filters everywhere will already be there.
Right.
And switching from this legislation, I mean, I see there's another question, but just moving on the filters, this is not the only idea for use of filters that is in the pipe at the moment. You've been working on the terrorist content online proposal as well.
Yeah.
Which is basically filters.
That's right. I mean, it's one of the core ideas of the terrorism regulation. So first of all, this is a regulation. So this means if it gets adopted, it would be directly applicable law throughout Europe. And the Commission made a proposal for it that did include upload filters, and the Council, so the national governments, have also adopted a position that includes filters. Now, currently, the Parliament is working on it, and there's going to be a vote in the Civil Liberties Committee on Monday. And on the plus side, the text of the Parliament Civil Liberties Committee does not include the possibility for a authority to force a platform to use upload filters. So that's a big improvement, I would say. However, there is still a big problem, which is that the Civil Liberties Committee doesn't plan to change the obligation for platforms to remove content that the authority has notified to them as being terrorist content within 1 hour of receiving the removal order. Now, if this only applied to Facebook, it probably wouldn't change all that much. I mean, you had the Christchurch attack a few weeks ago, and in that case, Facebook actually removed the stream within 17 minutes. So to a large extent, they are already complying with this. But it would be a huge problem for really small websites, because this terrorism regulation, unlike Article 13 of the Copyright Directive, doesn't just apply to professional for-profit platforms, but to any hosting provider where users can publicly upload stuff. So if you have a blog with an unmoderated comment function, it would fall under this rule that you have to react to a removal order within 1 hour. That includes on the weekends and at night.
Of course.
So this is a huge problem because from the perspective of a website operator who is not a big business, they can't do it by hand. They can't sit in front of their inbox day and night to wait for an email to come in that is most likely never going to come because most blogs don't have any terrorist content ever uploaded there. So what you have to do is basically set up an API that if a authority sends you a removal order, the content gets automatically blocked and then you can look at it later. And so you end up with filters again at the end. These aren't upload filters, but it would basically be a possibility for an authority to directly remove content from your website without any human oversight on the side of the platform.
And since it's the platform removing it, you can't also appeal that decision to the authority making the choice. Or how would that work?
Well, so at least in the position of the Civil Liberties Committee, we have been able to add this possibility to complain both to the hosting provider and to the authority in the case that your content gets wrongfully removed. But, well, this is not necessarily much of a consolation. I mean, we've seen this with Content ID, that they, for example, sometimes block live streams because of music in the background or something like that. And it's obviously a mistake, but if you complain and then it gets put back online 24 hours later, the damage is already done.
So we will have a position of the Civil Liberties Committee next week, and then the Parliament will adopt their position.
Yeah, so for the Civil Liberties Committee vote, which is on Monday, our group, the Green Group in the Parliament, has tabled an alternative which basically removes this 1 hour obligation and says the platform has to react as soon as possible. And of course that depends on how big the platform is. So the problem is that so far, as far as we know, the Liberals, the ALDE group, plans to vote for the 1 hour deadline. Yeah. Which is quite surprising because some of these members of the ALDE group in the Civil Liberties Committee, they were really against upload filters and they voted against upload filters on copyright. So this includes Cecilia Wikström, this includes Sophie Entwelt, Angelika Mlina, which are all liberal members who actually sort of understand these issues, and I would hope that they would vote against this idea.
But the moment you say terrorism, people get a bit nervous.
Exactly,
apparently.
exactly. Which is a bit...
Okay, but if you have the vote in the Civil Liberties Committee on Monday, will it then be in plenary before the elections, after elections?
I think they will try everything to have it before the elections, so that means the week after already there would be a plenary vote, which would be one more chance to remove the 1 hour deadline. Of course, after that, there would have to be negotiations. But if Council says we want 1 hour, and the Commission says we want 1 hour, and the Parliament also says we want 1 hour, it's not going to change in the negotiations, or at least it's very unlikely.
Yeah, depending on, of course, the new Parliament. So there is, even if the Parliament has a position now, this is one of the things where the new Parliament can have an impact.
That's true.
So with the copyright, if the Council says yes, that's done. But with the terrorist content, the new Parliament will have a say.
Yes, that's right. So they could change position,
You know, if we have the right people elected into the European Parliament.
Right, very important question.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, Oppa Klobber, Kevjack, Soulcover, Henke37 and others are discussing if it's GIF or GIF.
That is a very important question, and I'm sort of flip-flopping on it. I think I said GIF here. I would tend to say GIF, but I think both are possible.
We have the graphics interchange format as a argument. G size.
But if it's graphics, wouldn't that be a reason to say GIF?
Exactly.
Okay, fair enough. I stand corrected, but you know, I think both's possible.
I belong to the liberal school of thought that says that whatever you feel happy about saying, go ahead and say it.
All right. Another question. Will Article 1113, whatever, affect private messaging? So if you upload or send a picture or news article to a friend in a private message, will they be affected by the link tags and upload filter, since the very act of sending a picture file the friend is uploading?
I would say probably not. This is something that we've been able to mostly rule out. So Article 13 says that it's platforms that where users can publicly post things. So there would probably be a legal gray zone if we are talking about a platform that has relatively large group chats that anyone can join. That might be considered covered, but a private message from one person to another is definitely not covered by Article 15. The link tax, it says, first of all online services have to pay it. So that includes your blog or something like this, and in theory also a messaging service. But it has an exception for private or non-commercial uses by the individual users. So I suppose that a message between one person and another would be considered a private message and therefore be excluded. But there is some legal uncertainty there. What about if it's a chat between professional users, for example? Then they might not be covered by this exception. What do you think?
Well, I'm trying to figure out because it's not making available to the public. So if you don't,
no, it says make, yeah, it's like publicly accessible or something like that is what it says.
Yeah, but which copyright infringement would it fall under? Because it's not.
Well, actually, the link tax also covers the reproduction rights.
Yeah.
So in principle, the link tax would apply to messengers, but it might be excluded because of this exception for private and non-commercial users.
So this is one of the things we would have to look at the national implementation to make sure that private communication, because I mean it is clear that it's not intended to cover private communication. So if it does cover private communication, it would be sloppy implementation by the member state.
Right.
So, or
But I mean, the intention of the legislator is sometimes really difficult to guess because it's super contradictory. Because, for example, the legislator was repeatedly said in the negotiations that we do not want individuals posting links to Facebook to be covered. But on the other hand, we want Facebook to pay. So then the question is, what exactly is Facebook supposed to pay for if not for the posting of individual news articles by their users? So it's completely, like, sometimes it's really difficult to interpret the intention of the legislature because they don't always know what they're talking about.
And if you look at Swedish legal text, you will have these works that explains the intention of the law, and those are what the courts go at in addition to the law, same as with these recitals. But the difference is, of course, that those texts are written by the people producing the proposal, and in European legislation, the recitals come from the Commission like everything else, but then it's negotiated. So we change all the recitals to fit the compromises that are made with the Council and within the Parliament.
Yeah.
And those texts are also compromises. So sometimes we're like, okay, we wanted this as a law, but we can't find a majority. But if we put it in a recital, it seems like it was what we wanted, even though it's not in the actual text of the articles.
Yeah.
So the problem here is, of course, that I'm just going to finish. The problem here is that the recitals gets muddled up because of the political work that goes around into formulating those recitals.
Absolutely. I mean, basically, if you have a contradictory text and that's the only thing that everyone can agree on, then sometimes we agree on things that are just blatantly contradictory, which is difficult for the national parliament.
All right. Joel Torstensson on Facebook. What about blockchain publishing platforms that are by design very hard to censor? Platforms also doesn't have companies that own them in many cases.
So Article 30, I guess this is aimed at upload filters and not the link text, probably. So one thing that we managed to put in the definition is that it only applies to platforms that organize and promote the user uploaded content for profit-making purposes. So if you have a blockchain-based system that isn't run by companies, is it for profit? If it's not, then it shouldn't be covered. But here again, you're going to have to be really careful in the national implementation because some courts consider everything to be for profit where there is like an advertising banner to cover server costs or something like that. Or we have, for example, this decentralized competition to Twitter called Mastodon, which is, you know, not for profit, but there is a Patreon page to support the development and the hosting of the main Mastodon instance. And then there is the question, would a court consider that for profit? Because you can donate to the developments and maintenance. And there again, I think it would be really important to make sure that for profit is interpreted in a way that means that there is a company that is trying to make a profit from that and not just covering running costs.
And if you worry about how the national implementation will be, I can reassure you by a statement by the Collecting Society for Pictures in Sweden. They said that they will get involved in the national implementation to make sure that they maximize the profits for their members.
That's not very surprising. Yeah, I mean,
all the collecting societies that have been involved in this on the European level, they will just refocus on the national implementation, and they will viciously push for the best implementation in the sense of getting money to their associations.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely true, and I find it really interesting. You know, all the supporters of Article 13 always say, oh, it's not about your little discussion forum, it's about YouTube and Facebook. But then I have to wonder, if it's about YouTube and Facebook, why did the entertainment industry so viciously lobby against an exception for platforms that have a revenue below 10 million euros a year? Because YouTube and Facebook have revenues in the billions. So if it were actually true that this law was only aimed at YouTube and Facebook, they should have absolutely no problems with this exception, which was originally included in the parliament text, but in the end was pretty much completely removed.
In favor of Russian gas.
Yeah, that is also true. So Germany was really insisting on having an exception for small businesses,
and
up to 20 million euros actually, which would have helped, you know, discussion forums, little community websites and so on, startups. And yeah, then within just a few days, suddenly there was a deal between Germany and France on two deadlocked pieces of legislation, one being the Copyright Directive and the other one being the Energy Directive, where there had been a big conflict about the building of the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. So yeah, Germany sold out on copyright in order to get their pipeline, and I find it quite surprising that many of the Nordic and Baltic governments seem to be fine with that, because, well...
So, this is all happening in the council, the sort of black box of legislation that we don't see the details of.
Yeah.
So, we will actually have to round up. If there's one last question, we can take it. Otherwise...
I think we should go for rather fight a horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horse.
100 duck-sized horses, definitely, because I can crush them individually, like a long game of whack-a-mole, and they get weaker and weaker.
That's... I don't think you can argue with that. So, we're going to do one of those magic things we do here, where we make one person disappear and another person show up. And that's
okay.
Too soon. We don't want to show the audience how we actually do this magic.
Oh, okay.
So
it's basically by rolling away on this chair.
Very slowly into this vast space behind us. But to make sure that you can't see that happening, we are, if my computer works, we're actually going to see your speech in the European Parliament the day of the vote, where this...
yes, I was very angry. I remember that.
It's in German, but...
which makes it sound even more angry.
It's a lovely language. You should all learn German before I start it, and if you don't, then you'll have to go along with English subtitles. So thank you very much for coming. It's been a pleasure having you here. I hope to see you again soon, tonight, at my party, which is the real reason you're in town. And, well, we'll see you... Let's see, there,
now look. Me?
And now we won't see us.
3 Dinge sind an dieser Debatte ums Urheberrecht beispiellos. Erstens, 200.000 Menschen haben an diesem Wochenende gegen diese Reform demonstriert. 5 Millionen haben eine Petition gegen Uploadfilter unterschrieben. Noch nie hat es einen derart breiten Protest gegen eine EU-Richtlinie gegeben. Zweitens, Noch nie wurden Proteste von diesem Haus so konsequent ignoriert. Bereits im Sommer sahen sich Wählerinnen und Wähler einer massiven Desinformationskampagne ausgesetzt. Anstatt sich mit Kritik auseinanderzusetzen, wurde jede kritische Stimme mit Beleidigungen überzogen. Da wurden Gerüchte gestreut, wie eben vom Kollegen Cavada, E-Mails kämen von Bots. Die EU-Kommission hat Kritikerinnen als Mob bezeichnet und der Delegationsleiter der CDU, Herr Caspary, sagt sogar, Demonstranten wären bezahlt. Alle diese Diffamierungen sind frei erfunden und leicht widerlegt. Lanciert wurden sie von einigen wenigen Lobbygruppen und verbreitet wurden sie im Feuilleton bestimmter Zeitungen, die sich von der Urheberrechtsreform Profite erhoffen. Leider hat diese Desinformation funktioniert. Heute, wo Bilder von Massendemonstrationen um die Welt geben, glauben manche immer noch, die Mails kämen nicht von echten Menschen. Dieser Glaube, alle Kritik sei aus Amerika gesteuert, hat sie dagegen geimpft, sich mit dem Bedenken inhaltlich auseinanderzusetzen. Ganz gleich, dass die Warnungen vor Uploadfilter vom Bundesdatenschutzbeauftragten kommen, vom UN-Sonderberichterstatter für Meinungsfreiheit und von führenden Forschungszentren. Drittens, niemand, weder die Union noch die SPD noch die Opposition, hält diese Reform für sinnvoll. Niemand will die politische Verantwortung übernehmen für Uploadfilter, die mit Artikel 13 kommen. Dafür stimmen wird die Bundesregierung trotzdem. Liebe Kollegen, ich bitte Sie, Sie haben alle Ihre Zeit. Ich möchte bitte auch meine Rede halten dürfen. Danke schön. Frau Vorsitzende, ich warte, bis sich die Kollegen beruhigt haben.
Excuse me, Madam Reda, is Herr Brock, bitte, please. Madam Reda has the floor. Respect the speaker who has the floor. Madam Reda, please continue. Thank you.
Niemand in der Bundesregierung will Verantwortung für die Uploadfilter übernehmen, nicht einmal Kanzlerin Merkel. Dafür stimmen wird die Bundesregierung trotzdem. Und seit gestern wissen wir auch, woran das liegen könnte, denn die FAZ hat einen Kuhhandel zwischen Deutschland und Frankreich aufgedeckt, wonach Deutschland anscheinend Uploadfilter akzeptiert im Tausch gegen Frankreichs Zustimmung zur Nord Stream Gaspipeline. Das Tragischste an diesem Vorgang ist.
Madam, I'm delighted you're all wide awake this morning, but please allow Madam Reda to continue speaking, and that's from both sides of the House. Madam Reda.
Meine Damen und Herren, das Tragischste an diesem Vorgang ist, eine neue Generation, die dieses Jahr zum ersten Mal zur Europawahl geht, lernt gleich ihre Lektion. Eure Proteste sind nichts wert, die Politik wird Lügen über euch auskippen und sich von Sachargumenten nicht beeindrucken lassen, wenn es um knallharte geopolitische Interessen geht. Diese Erfahrung, dieses Gefühl von Machtlosigkeit wird sie nachhaltig prägen. Liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, so können wir nicht Politik machen. Diese Richtlinie darf nicht ohne Änderungen durchkommen. Das wäre nicht nur verheerend für die Freiheit im Netz, es würde auch einer ganzen Generation das Vertrauen rauben, dass die Politik funktioniert und dass dieses Parlament die Interessen der Bevölkerung vertritt. Deshalb müssen wir Artikel 11 und 13 streichen. Danke schön.
Så, välkommen tillbaka. Vi skulle nu byta till svenska, men eftersom vi upptäckte när vi hade en internationell gäst att vi även fick internationella tittare så kör vi vidare på engelska. So I was saying very briefly that we were supposed to switch to Swedish, but since we have so many international viewers today, thanks to our international guest, we will continue in English. If you don't understand anything we're saying, it's probably because I talk too fast, and then I will slow down, or just write a question and say what the heck is he saying, and we will sort it out. But now I'm joined by Katarina, my regular.
Hello. Nice to be here. I was not saying hello to you.
No, because we've already seen each other.
Yeah.
Because you were sitting behind the camera.
I was, and I was listening to this conversation, which was very interesting. And I'm also really happy that Julia could be here, and it's really impressive, I have to say, the work that she has done in the parliament. And even though we didn't manage to get all the way in the vote in the parliament with a copyright directive, it's impressive how how much, I would say, motivation you've sparked in all these people around Europe who really think this is, who are really worried about the of this and all the engagement that where you've been the central. Now I'm talking to Julia who's sitting behind here, so you're wondering
you
why
basically just switched seats. So it's not you, the audience. I mean, you're great, but Julia is the one getting all the praise at the moment.
Yeah. I'm very impressed and glad that you could join us here today.
Ooh, now we have this happy Skype sound in the background. So what's happening, we're having a second international guest, but she couldn't make it all the way from Finland because it's far away. So on Skype, and I'm not sure if I have to do like that. You'll see her. This is Saga Nyrén from Helsinki.
Hello, can you hear me all right?
I can hear you. You can hear her.
I can hear you, yeah.
Let's just see if the tech guy says that the audience can hear you. Because that's the important thing. I mean, it will be really weird if we have a conversation and they don't hear you and they only hear us.
I don't think they can. Stop audio output.
Okay, so I have to do magic things in Skype. Just hang on where you are.
While you do that, let's answer
And
the question.
there will be a question that Katarina can answer while I do that.
Vladimir Silenkov asked, will I still be able to upload videos on my non-monetized YouTube channels, which are fair use and have no copyright on them?
Yeah, so with the Article 13, it doesn't matter if your channel is commercial or not, because the platform is commercial. So your content the content that you upload will be filtered, and then if there is copyrighted material, it will get stuck in those filters, whether your channel is commercial or not. I think that was the answer to the question, right?
I hope that was the answer, because we're going to see if the audience can hear Saga. Now, hi.
Hi. Can
Again.
you hear me now?
Well, I can hear you as before. But the audience can't. So we could do the whole that I repeat everything you say, but that seems really, really silly.
Yeah.
So let's see. Hold on. Say something again.
Hello.
Did we get a thumbs up from the tech guy? There's no thumbs up from the tech guy. Okay, so this is every time we do something new, and every time those new things make things interesting for us.
Can we raise the volume on
Say we hear her.
Ja, det kan fungera genom...
Okay.
If you just raise the volume there, maybe.
Yeah. Okay.
So that it goes through the computer to the mic.
So tech guy is deaf.
Okay, so
She said hello.
this is how we do. You speak really loudly, and they will hear you through the secondary microphone. Hi, Saga. We're really happy to talk to you. We've never spoken before.
Hi.
Do you? Oh, well, there you see me, and there you see Katarina, so you know who you're talking to.
Hi.
So we're doing the Pirate-TV in Sweden, and you are running in the national elections in Finland.
Yes, that's right. We have parliamentary elections coming up on the 14th of April.
That's pretty soon.
Yes, that's very soon. I wanted to actually do this from our container that we have in the center of Helsinki, where we are giving out our campaign material, but our neighboring party started a very loud loudspeaker presentation right as we were supposed to start. So
And now you found a nice brick wall as the backdrop. But that's perfectly fine. The important thing is not your container, it's the elections. So you're running in the elections all over Finland.
yes, we have candidates in each district in Finland except for Åland.
Uh,
And in Helsinki, where I am a candidate, we have the best chance of getting in our chairperson, Petrus Pennanen. We are in alliance with the Feminist Party, the Animal Rights Party, and with the Liberal Party of Finland. And that gives us a very realistic shot at our first place in Parliament.
And this is very, very confusing for well, probably for our international audience, but especially for the Swedish audience. How is this alliance working? Because it would be difficult to do something similar in Sweden. How can you set up such an alliance? like you can get one person elected. From which party would that person be? Do you have a list in order? What's the threshold? Do you have a national threshold, or can you be elected just in Helsinki?
We don't have a national threshold. It's district-wise. Whoever gets enough votes will be elected. So how it works in Finland, it's called the Jefferson method in American English, or the D'Hondt method in European languages, and it means that for our list, whoever personally gets the most votes will be the one who is elected if the entire list gets enough votes to come in.
Okay, so if the list get a seat, then you look at who's on the list, and whoever got the individual most little dots gets that seat. That sounds a bit risky. I mean, how do you know that your party will get a seat and not the...
Realistically speaking, this is a race between the feminist party Katju-Aron and the pirate party Petros-Pennanen.
Both of them are elected to the city council, right?
Yes, both of them have a seat in the city council. And we are taking a risk here that the feminist party will get Katju-Aron elected, but we see that this is a risk worth taking because we have been a party in Finland outside of parliament for 11 years now. And a lot of people tell us that they would vote for us if we had a chance of getting in. And this is, of course, a problematic way of thinking, because if all those people voted for us, we would have gotten in the last elections already.
Yeah, that I think a lot of pirates all over Europe has the same problem, where they use the threshold as an excuse not to vote for a party you sympathize with, but you're afraid that your vote will not count, which is of course incorrect, because the vote still counts in some way. And if you vote for a party that would get elected, if you didn't vote for them, they would still get elected. So the individual vote has as little impact whether or not you throw it above or below the threshold. But this will get you... Sorry, I'm cutting you off here.
No, I have a question, but if you had something directly connected, you can continue, and I'll take the question.
Yeah, so this seat will go to whoever gets the most individual votes. But if that person gets run over by a bus, it's then the second person who got the second most votes who gets to go there while the first person is in hospital.
Hospital stay, I don't think, is enough for...
Okay, but the graveyard. It's a really quick and hard bus.
But yes,
But the order of substitutes.
The next person on the list who got the votes.
Okay.
The Feminist Party has had very similar politics to us, at least in Helsinki City Council. And Petros-Pennanen and Katju-Aron have worked together a lot, so that's why we felt comfortable with this alliance.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a question, because you have representatives in 2 cities, right? In Helsinki and Jyväskylä? Yeah.
Yes.
The Pirate Party has 2 seats. Has that helped you in this election, that you managed to succeed in those elections? That was 2 years ago, right? Or something like that?
Yes. Yes, it was 2 years ago, and it has definitely helped us a lot. Since Petros-Pennanen is one of the people who got elected, and he is now the chairperson of the party and running for parliament from Helsinki, the fact that people have been able to follow his actual politics for 2 years definitely gives him a leg up compared to earlier elections. And many people out here, out on the streets, when we tell them that we have people in the city councils, they feel much more comfortable voting for us, because now we're actually tried and tested. Some of our policies have been passed in Helsinki and in Jyväskylä.
So going for municipal elections as a platform to grow, that would be an advice from the Finnish pirates.
Definitely, because then the locals find out more about you, and we get much more visibility as well.
Yeah. That's a change we would like to do in Sweden, to put the municipal elections separate to the
national
elections, because now we have both at the same time, which kind of takes the focus off the municipal elections, because it's on the national level.
We've also had these alliances in the municipal elections, and in Helsinki we would not have gotten a seat without the alliance. And in Espoo we got the supplant position, the standing-in council person, because we were in an alliance with the Liberal Party.
Okay, so you have 2 regular seats and 1 substitute in a third place. Well, that's impressive. before we let you go, is there anything we can do from our side to help you? Because I mean, any pirate win is a win for all pirates. So what can we do to strengthen the Finnish pirates in this election that is in 2 weeks? 1 week? 2 weeks? 2 weeks.
If there are any Finnish citizens living in Sweden who have not yet voted, I think they still have a chance for about a week to vote by mail or at the voting places at the embassies. So that's very recommended. Or you can just, drive over to Finland and vote. Take the vote, anything. So definitely, any visibility is greatly appreciated. It brings us more credibility as a party to see that we have international cooperation. And then, of course, there's a lot of Finns living in Sweden who should come out and vote.
Yeah. So if there are any Finnish people watching here now, I don't know if there is, but if there would be, what would you want to say to them now?
Well, even though I'm a candidate myself, we definitely need Petruspennanen to get the most votes. So that is the most effective way to get the pirates into parliament, is any Finn living outside the borders of Finland, vote for Petruspennanen, and any Finn who is in Helsinki, vote for Petruspennanen.
Well, that's a very clear message. I think our viewers have heard it. I want to thank you so much for calling in. It's been a pleasure. I hope to get to report from the Finnish elections in a few weeks that we have a Finnish member of parliament from the Pirate Party. Thank you so much. And I'm not now going to shut you down with this whole buttony thingy. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Oh, and there's that. So, I think for the last... this is going to be a short episode. The main reason it's a short episode is because, well, I have a birthday party. So we have to rush there. Because, I mean, you're also in Malmö mainly for my birthday party.
Yeah.
So, that's, the advice for you. If you want Pirate-TV to come to your town, you can arrange a birthday party for me, and that will happen.
Or some other person worth celebrating.
Yes, then we might arrive.
We might
as well.
come.
We'll see. It also helps if you have green screens that we can project our backdrop on, so no one can tell the difference. And we also require a table and cameras, but we can probably get the cameras with us. But the table, green screen, party, that is what you have to arrange. So then we'll come to you.
Yeah.
I think that's all for this week, unless there's some questions popping in that we forgot.
Let's see.
This is where the non-tech guy, but the guy with the other computer that
assistant,
the social media expert is desperately checking for any comments that we should bring up into this episode.
Otherwise, I just want to say it's so fun to have guests on the show. I think we had last week as well, and I hope we'll have more guests in the future.
And what should you do if you want to be a guest on Pirate-TV?
You should contact us. It's quite easy. We're easy to get a hold of. Any channel. For example, you can join our Discord channel, and if you have input on the show, what guests you want to see here, if you want to be a guest, or what you want us to talk about, then that's the best. How do they find the Discord channel? Is it called Pirat-TV?
So I think they find the Discord channel by going into our Twitch thingy and check there, or it might be posted on the Facebook link to the chat, or they can just ask somewhere, and our social media guys, because we have more than one, they will respond with the link. I mean, if you're one of those guys that can make a little text go down here with those that information, let us know and we can involve you in the team. We're currently looking for people who can do that and who can do animations.
Oh, we have a volunteer.
Oh, we have a volunteer.
Wonderful.
So
in the studio.
Next week we will be back roughly at the same time with the same people. We'll go back to Swedish then, though. If you want us to continue in English, we might, have to branch out and have one English show and one Swedish show.
Yeah, or get some more international guests.
Yes, we could still have 2 shows, but we'll see. We should be back next Saturday, same time. Well, it will be the same place for you. It will not be the same place for us, but with that, I think we're done.
Yeah.
So I have a new...
And happy birthday.
Thank you. So I have a new done button. I didn't have that before, but there's a button here. If I click that, this all ends. It's all done.
Let's try it.